All right. So again, thank you everyone for being here today. We're going to spend the hour going over list building in Van and EveryAction. But first, I'd love to introduce one of my wonderful co-hosts and one of my co-coaches at Instituto, Trinity, to tell you a little bit more about who we are at Instituto and what we do.
Hi, everyone. Yep. So I'm Trinity, pronounced she, they. And so if this is your first time at an Instituto event, welcome. Welcome. We're glad to have you. So to tell you a little bit about us, our mission is to build political power with communities of color and low-income communities in Arizona. And we do this by accelerating and incubating organizations to mobilize voters and build political power. It is a mouthful. What does that mean? So for example, the training that you all are joining us on tonight is a way that we can just support our partners and keep accelerating and building that power. I'll pass it back to you, Desiree, unless anyone has any questions about who we are and what we do.
Awesome. And I'll go ahead and drop the website link in the chat as well. So if you're curious and you want to dig in, you have that resource. I'll be your trainer today, so I'll do a brief introduction of myself. My name is Desiree Perez. I use they and she pronouns. And I have been working in movement spaces here in Arizona for nearly the past 10 years. And I've been in rural northern Arizona that whole time. So I see Ray's in the house, and I love to see our rural communities represented. But I was working with Planned Parenthood Arizona for 8 years as an organizer and an organizing manager. And during that time, I also became our affiliate's data manager, and I got very comfortable with Van and EveryAction and other tools like Hustle and virtual phone banks. And I am so happy to be able to pass some of that knowledge on to you all at today's training. I will go ahead and pass it back to Trinity so that we can go over some of our community agreements.
Thank you. So I'll go ahead and read this first one, but I'm going to ask for some volunteers. So feel free to unmute at any time. I won't pick on anyone, but I'll go ahead and read this first one, and then I'll explain what it means to me. So this one says, what's said here stays here, what's learned here leaves here. And to me, that just means kind of just respecting the virtual space. If someone says anything, like if a story comes up, you know, it's not my business to share, and just respecting each other and respecting the space. And then knowing that we are, though, able to take the lessons that we learned here from Desiree and each other and apply that to our lives or wherever we see best fit. Does anyone want to help me out with the second one?
I can go.
Cool.
Flow in, flow out, take space, and make space.
And what does that mean to you?
To me, that means that if, you know, things happen in the background in life, you know, you can leave, come back to it. And also taking up space is, you know, feel free to get off the mic, but also if you're oversharing or you feel like other people are not as being active, maybe make space for them as well.
Awesome. Thank you for volunteering. Does anyone want to do the third one?
One speaker, one mic.
And what does that mean to you?
Only one person speaks at a time. You don't talk over each other.
Yes, thank you, which is very easy to do over Zoom. So thank you for sharing. And maybe I'll pass it back to Desiree for this last one because I really like this one. I'll let you have it.
For sure. Thank you, Trinity. So the last one is jargon giraffe. It's pretty common You know, in nonprofit spaces and organizing spaces, we've got acronyms for everything. We have special programs that we use. In data, we've got even more acronyms, but we want to make sure that everyone is starting from the same foundation and has the same opportunity to learn and grow. So if I start using a term that's jargon, it doesn't mean anything to you, please feel free to stop, like ask a question. You can drop it in the chat. You can raise your hand and ask us to break it down for you. Like, we want everyone to be starting from a position of shared knowledge. So if there's something you don't understand, don't be afraid to ask the question. And that is Jargon Giraffe. Before we move on, if we missed anything, please feel free to drop it in the chat if we need to add another community agreement or another group norm to today's training to make this a space where everyone feels comfortable being vulnerable and being a little bit uncomfortable, because that's our growth edge. While you take time to drop that in the chat, if there is anything else, I'm going to cover our learning objectives for today. So we have 4 learning objectives. We want to be able to leave this training today being able to use create a list in Van to pull our lists. We want to understand how to narrow, add, and remove contacts to create our lists. We want to be able to think critically about how we're filtering to find our target audiences. And we want to be able to export our lists for phone banks, text banks, and canvases. All right, so we're going to start to dig into our training content now. This is going to be an interactive training. So the first thing we want to do is have everyone who has a Van account take this moment to sign into Van. I do want to note that we might not all have access to Van, and even if we do, we might not all have access to the same features and permission levels that we're covering today, but it is still valuable for you to understand what we're doing and how it works, so that if you need help or if you need to be able to do these things, you can ask for the permission levels, or you can ask somebody with those permission levels to help you, like your Van administrator. So again, we're just going to take a moment here to have folks sign in. If you haven't bookmarked your sign-in page for Van, it's one of my first best practices that I'll share with you today, because it's not just like van.login.com, right? It's like targetsmartvan.com or ppfa.securevan.com. But when you are signed in, go ahead and drop an emoji in the chat. And when we see a good number of emojis, we'll know that it's time for us to roll on and keep going with our content. For real, Tanya, right? It's bookmarked, it's on the homepage. Oh, I love the Halloween emojis. It really fits the thunderstorm rainy day vibes that I have up here. Yes, August is for real pre-Halloween. I'm coming to Phoenix tomorrow. Hopefully some of these thunder clouds follow me. All right. I'm starting to see a good amount of emojis in the chat. So I will move on to our temperature check. But if you have not finished signing into Van, that's okay. You've got time. So temperature check. I just want to get a sense of the room. How comfortable are you in this space with creating lists in Van? So that might be in EveryAction or my voters, but drop a 1 in the chat if you are like not comfy at all. Drop a 2 in the chat if you're somewhat comfortable. Maybe this is something you could do on your own. but you'd want to spend a lot of time on it to feel like you did it right. Or drop a 3 in the chat if you're totally comfy. You pull lists all day, every day. You could do it in your sleep. All right, excellent. I'm starting to see some 2s in the chat. And just a reminder, this is a 101 space. So you might see things that you are already comfortable with, but it never hurts to, go over the skills, have a space to practice with other folks. Awesome. Oh, I'm seeing some 1.2. There's more, not quite 1.5. I love it. All right, excellent. Okay, so very briefly, especially for our 1s and 2s in the room, I do want to remind people about the difference between EveryAction or my campaigns and my voters. So here in Van, you'll see that you're either working in your EveryAction, and sometimes that says my campaigns tab, or you're working in my voters tab. And my EveryAction or my campaigns houses data related to your organization, whereas the My Voters tab houses data from the Van voter file. And for our example today, we're going to be using the My Voters tab. All right. Next, I'm going to be sharing my screen, and I'm going to do some work in Van for you to just kind of watch. Don't worry about trying to replicate what I'm doing just yet. I'm going to walk you through my steps, and then everyone is going to have an opportunity to practice those skills afterward. So again, for this exercise, we are going to be building a list for, let's say, GeoTV outreach, and we're going to be using those narrow, remove, and add functions. We've also made a handout that closely follows today's example. So you can use that to follow along. You can also use that as a guide for your own list creation work in the future when we are not in this shared space. So that has been dropped in the chat, and I'm going to start sharing my screen. All right, so now we are in my Van Live, and to create a list, I'm going to go here in the middle column to create a new list. And here you have a list of different criteria that you can use to build the list of contacts you want to get in touch with. Just to start us off, when you get here, it might look different because everything's going to be in alphabetical order unless you favorite it. And today I'm going to be using these 4 categories. So I favorited them. But if I were to unclick the star, you'd see age goes back into the list of criteria in alphabetical order. But I want it back up here at the top. And if I wanted it to be the first thing on the list, I could always move it up there. But let's say I'm trying to build a list of people who are infrequent voters, and I want to get them out to vote in 2022. There are often more than one way to do things in Van, but today I want to go to voting history. And for an infrequent voter, let's say I talked to my colleagues and we decided for us, an infrequent voter is going to be somebody who has voted once or hasn't voted at all since 2016. I could come here and select general elections through 2016. I could also select primary elections, but I want to just stick to general elections. And this is a person who's done no more than one of the following. So they have only voted once or not at all in these elections. And I think it's best practice to hit preview my results after each step. So you can just get a sense of how big is your list and are you doing your list creation correctly? Like, is it narrowing and removing and adding people the way you'd expect? My Van, I'm only having access to Arizona. If you have a Van committee that has access to other states, you might also want to make sure in this step you're narrowing to just Arizona. But I'm based in Flagstaff. So let's say I'm only running my GOTV program in Coconino County. So in that case, I want to add a step. I want to narrow my list of people to Coconino County. So I'm going to come to home districts to do that. Just a fun fact, county here is blue. So you could either choose Coconino County from the drop down, or if you wanted to select multiple counties, you could click on the word county and it will take you to this menu where you could select multiple counties. But again, I want to narrow only to Coconino County. So I'll check that box and I'll hit save. And now I see like, okay, something has changed. It's asking me to refresh my step. And now it has that I have narrowed people to Coconino County. And if I preview my results, I will see that my list has indeed narrowed. All right, and let's say that I'm working for a reproductive justice organization. That's my comfort zone. So I'm working for a reproductive justice org, and I want to make sure that I'm only turning out people to vote who support abortion access. So I might want to create a new step now to remove people from my list. And in this case, I want to go to scores because there is a Target Smart Pro-Choice score here. And I want to remove anybody who is 40% likely to support abortion access or less, because those people, I don't want to turn them out to vote for the anti-abortion governor or something like that. I want to make sure that I'm turning them out for folks that are going to stand with my organization on reproductive rights and justice. So I'm going to refresh my results and you'll see that yes, people have been removed from my list. Now, finally, let's say I want to also talk to young voters in Coconino County. So I want to add people, and I'm going to come up to age to add this last group of folks. So I want to talk to people between 18 to 30 years old. And when you are adding, you're adding a group of people and it will not be affected by any previous removing or narrowing that you've done. So even though I narrowed step 2 to Coconino County, I need to make sure I'm selecting Coconino County in this step 2. So when I add folks, I'm adding those 18 to 30-year-olds and they are in Coconino County. So let's refresh that step. Yes, 18 to 30-year-olds in Coconino. Now I'll preview my results and it should go up from that 27,000 number. All right. And now we are back at a list size of about 37,000 folks. All right. Now let's take a moment to breathe. I am going to bring us back to our presentation here. And let's just take a moment for questions and processing. How are folks feeling about what we just covered? And what questions, if any, are coming up for you? Please feel free to come off mute or drop your responses in the chat.
I have a question.
For sure.
Yeah, for list, what are like common, I guess, filters for campaigns, like when they build lists? Like, what are some factors for how we would narrow down a list?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, and it's going to depend on what kind of campaign you're running. So in this example, you know, I am choosing people based on you know, how they feel about abortion access, their age ranges, and their voting history, because I wanted to target infrequent voters. But if you're running a campaign where you are maybe working in a specific zip code, or maybe you're running a actual like coordinated campaign or a candidate or a ballot measure campaign, and you have specific target districts that you want to work in, you might choose that. If you know that you want to turn out people who are, you know, again, if this is like a coordinated campaign, you want to turn out people who are likely to vote for a Democratic candidate. You can use scores to help you find that. Like, did this person vote for Joe Biden? Did this person have a turnout score that was like 70 to 90%, so that we know we can count on this person to turn out, and we know that they're likely to vote for a Democrat. Like, maybe those are the people we want to talk to. Or if you're running a persuasion program, maybe you're looking for those folks who are likely to turn out, but you know, maybe they're good on one or two of your issues, but you need to talk to them about candidates in the future. So yeah, it really depends on what you're trying to do, who you're trying to talk to. Does that answer your question, or is there maybe something more specific I can get into for you?
Yeah, no, that pretty much answers it. Yeah, thank you
Awesome.
for that. Mhm.
Thanks, May. Any other questions or reactions to just list building and seeing me walk through it? Sorry, we got a cat joining us for our training today. Her name is Mischief, so it fits. All right, so if you have questions still, you know, please feel free to drop them in the chat. There's going to be another time for us to stop and take questions, so I will move us on to the interactive part. I told you it's going to be an interactive training. So far, I've just been talking at you. This is our chance to really dig in and tinker in Van. So I will be opening some breakout rooms in just a moment. And when you're in your breakout room, I'll also be dropping an exercise, but these are your two exercise options. You can either use My Voters and practice building a list that would include young, BIPOC, and Democratic women between 45 and 65 years old in the Chandler and Mesa areas. Or if you want to try EveryAction, which again has your organization's data, try making a list of people who have completed a shift at least one of your events since July 1st, and anyone with a verified cell phone. Let me go ahead and grab that exercise on paper and drop it in the chat so that you can look at this once you're in your breakout rooms. But let's go ahead and get folks sorted into breakout rooms. And we'll take about 10 minutes in these breakout rooms to work with our partners. And actually, lastly, if you have an actual list that you're trying to build, you've got work to do, you want some feedback in real time on how you're creating your list, please feel free to bring that up in your group. And if folks are interested, work on your actual list. All right, so let's go ahead. We're going to have, let's see, how many folks do we have here? We're going to have 2 breakout rooms with 3 to 4 folks in them. And let's go ahead and get started. Trinity, I did not assign you to a breakout room, but I can. Would you like to go to a breakout? All right, and for anyone who has not joined a breakout room, let me know if you need any assistance before you join. Please feel free to come off mute. Let's see, Tammy, Melissa, Trinity, please let me know if there is anything you need before you head to breakout rooms, or if you just need space to work on it on your own in this main room, that's okay too. And I'm gonna go ahead and stop recording while we're in breakouts. All right, so now that we've all had a chance to go into breakout rooms, practice with a partner on list creation, let's share. Please feel free to come off mute or drop your takeaways in the chat, but I'm really curious about what kind of list you built and the steps that you took to create your list. So walk me through your goal and your logic on how you built your list to get there.
Sorry, but we didn't build a list, so that's why we're not talking.
No worries, no worries. I did want to circle back actually, May. I was gonna get to it in the question section, but we were asking like, what's the best way to build a list for a campaign? Would you mind sharing what campaign you're working on, and like what kind of list you're needing to build?
So this is my first door knocking campaign for our C4, and we're targeting AA and HPI voters in LD 9 and 13. And that's pretty much all I got. I don't know, if we should narrow it more, like if there should be separate lists for different scripts. I kind of just need guidance on, what are the best practices and all that.
Yeah. So one thing that I thought about when you had asked your question of like, how should we narrow our list? And I think you hit on it just now, like, should we narrow it anymore? Like, what else should we include? Research is going to be your best friend. There's a lot of organizations that are doing polling right now, surveys right now, that can tell you things like, oh, actually, abortion access is very important to, maybe AA, NHPI, and Latinx communities between the ages of. And then, oh, okay, yeah, maybe we do want to have an abortion script for people in those age ranges. Or maybe they're letting you know income levels. Oh, between income levels of $65,000 plus, actually a message about the previous governor's failure to work with working families was an important message. And then you can talk about economic justice with those folks. And so I think it's really important to share with you all, since we're talking about list creation, that we do have the Arizona Research Consortium. They're a partner through the One Arizona and Arizona Wins table. And they collect research. They are a clearinghouse for other organizations too in Arizona that are doing research. And that research can, again, help you inform, like, okay, do we have to narrow based on age? Do we have to narrow based on income? And other criteria that might help your lists be more effective. So I wanted to throw that out there. All right. Before we move on, and I'm going to take us to this questions screen. Were there any other questions, or is there anyone else who built a list that wants to talk through how they did it, to kind of see if any other folks in the room have questions about how they made their lists, or best practices from their own experience?
I can share a little bit.
Yeah.
So I've been working in kind of a data position at my organization, Rural Arizona Engagement, for about 2 years now. And so when I first started, I really didn't know anything about VAN, and it was really difficult to know best practices. But I think for me, especially when lists become very complicated, really making sure that each step is its own step and you don't like overlap, because if you have to change something or like narrow it to a specific region, it can be a lot easier if you have like a good base list to start with, and you can kind of change it to what you need. But that's what I would say.
Yeah, no, that's a really great best practice. Thank you for sharing that, Kate. I'll also just add here that race modeling in VAN and the voter file is not super accurate. So if you can add any other criteria to your search, if you're particularly interested in talking to communities based on ethnic groups and racial groups, let's spend some time after the training talking about how we do that. We can set up coaching sessions, but it's really hard because the data is not perfect. We could have a whole session on racial bias in data, where we can spell it out a little bit more about how we can have better practices. But Kate, I thought your step about like creating a new step in your list creation for every narrow, every add, every remove is really good, because it'll keep your list clean and easy to edit. All right. Oh, that's right. I wanted to go back to screen sharing. So I'm going to bring my screen share back up really quick. Let's say that this is the list we just built together. Let's say that I'm happy with this list. When I'm ready to see who's actually in this list, not just preview who they are. Oh, it's going to make me give my pin again. Let me do this really quick. It sat dormant for too long. But having a pin, having this kind of second level of security is best practice. If you don't already have it enabled, please enable it. It'll stop people from potentially being able to just get on your van if you left your computer idle. It does really mess with your brain, right? All right, so now that my van is active again, let's say I'm happy with my search. I want to run that search and I want to get my list of people. It's going to take me to this next screen and it'll break it down. There's, 37,000 people on this list. I have 17,000 home phones, 18,000 preferred phones. So that might include cell phones. You see verified cells, likely cells, not cells. Doors. So these are going to be doors that I could knock on if I was doing a canvas, and mailboxes where I could send mailers to if I was doing a mailer program. And this is a sampling of my list because my list is too large to display as a whole. You can save this list. And if you do that, you could save it as a static list. So I want these exact people that I pulled just now, every time I come back to this list. You could put it in a new folder, give it a name, and make sure you give it a good description so you know what this list contains. Or if you want it to be dynamic, you like your search criteria, but you want to be able to see how your search changes every week because you're running canvases every week. You could save it as a search instead. And again, you can put it in a folder, like I want to have all of my August canvas lists in one folder, or I want all my 2022 phone banks in one folder. Give it a name and give it a good description so you know what it is that you're saving and running every time you pull your list. But without saving it, you could also export it. So standard export, there are some pre-made lists that you could export it as. Phone type lists are gonna put the phone numbers front and center. Household phone lists are going to show the phones that are associated within a household versus individuals. Standard text is the most editable, and you can customize it to have whatever you want on it. So standard text is going to give you these things just automatically. But let's say I want to make sure that I know whether this person has received their ballot. And I don't really care about their mailing address because I'm just wanting to know about their voting address. Or I want to include their age and I want to include their party. You could add whatever you want here. You can remove everything except the van ID. And then you can even save your new list as its own export format that will show up in your drop-down menu next time you do this. You can export it as an Excel file or as a Google Sheet, which is really handy and which is pretty new. I think they only started doing that since 2020, but I love it. And that's, again, just to export the data. If you want to get this list talking with one of your virtual phone banks that you've created, you could choose calls. If you want this list to talk to minivan, so you can run a canvas, we don't have minivan activated, so my little tile here is grayed out, but you could click on minivan and you could port this list over to a minivan campaign. Or if you're using Scale to Win or a program like Hustle, you could use the messages tile right here to export your list directly to your text service provider or your texting program. Yeah, so those are the different ways you can save your list, save your search, and export your list. So let's go back now to our presentation. We wanted to learn how to create a list in Van, and we were able to do that. We wanted to get really familiar with narrow, add, and remove. We were able to do that. We wanted to think critically about how we were filtering, and I think a lot of good information came from the questions that you all had for that topic. And then, of course, we wanted to cover how to export our lists once we created them for our phone banks, our text banks, and our canvases. And we did it. So congratulations, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this 101 on list creation. I do want to just remind you all that we have a picture guide that you can always come back to. You can share it with your volunteers. You can share it with your organizers as they come in, so they really know how to create lists as you're scaling up your program. And that is in the chat. Let's see. All right. And now Victoria was, I'm so happy to have you join us. She was able to join us while we were in breakouts. Victoria, if you don't mind, could I pass it to you to talk about today's survey?
Yes, thank you so much. So one of the things that we do here at Instituto is that we love feedback. We create these amazing surveys to get feedback from you all. We want to learn how to make changes to our programming and make sure that what we're offering is exactly what folks need to carry out the work. We want to be able to support your missions and make sure that we're supporting and setting up for success where we can. So if y'all can get your phones out and your camera and scan this QR code, I would really appreciate it. And this way you'll be able to fill out a survey. I'm the data person behind these surveys, and they make me really happy when I get a whole bunch of responses. I'm like, yay. And I know sometimes it's at the end of sessions, but please let us know your feedback. Thank you so much, Desiree, for hosting today, and Trinity for support, and the rest of the team that's here. As you know, we're learners at Instituto. Oh yeah, like who it was. Yes, thank you, May. I see you. Yes, fill out the survey and let us know, right? How satisfied were you, your takeaways? We want to make sure that everything that we're doing, yes, I see y'all with the survey. And let us know how you feel. Let us know all the things. I'm just gonna talk to y'all as you fill it out. And also know if you have any other needs or any support. I know we're calling it coaching, but we're here to have these one-on-ones to help you build your list, right? I know that tomorrow we'll be with May and the team there with y'all, you know, to support, but know that we are also available to do like, to help build some of these things with you all. And yeah, any questions, comments, anything y'all want to share? Y'all are doing your survey, that's why there's no questions. See, yeah, go through it. Yes. And also that's another thing, if y'all want to design something like this for your programming events, either through EA surveys or just like a Google form, Airtable, whatever, we're down to help you out with your other programming too, to make sure that you're getting feedback from your community as you're reaching out, as you're doing your programming. So I'll just plant the seed, and then we can go from there. So this is our thing. Yeah. Cool. So I'll
Awesome.
pass it back to you all. Thank you so much for filling out this survey and giving us your feedback.
Yes, thank you for giving us data so that we can improve our programming. I'll go ahead and I will pass it to Trinity. Trinity, if you'd like to round out today's training by talking about our upcoming offerings, I would love that so much.
Of course, of course. So while if any of you still need to fill out your survey, you could continue doing that. But we have some upcoming events. As always, we have our one-on-one coaching. So I think most of you are in data, so your coach would be Desiree. But if you have anyone in your organization who needs comms trainings, anyone who maybe your executive directors need some higher level training, we got it all. So definitely reach out for that. And you could also request a training if you're like, I need more spaces like this. You're like, you have this one idea, you really need help on something specific, you can submit a request for a training. We'll do one similar to how today went. And to see our full calendar, we really do have a lot of events and trainings going on, which is amazing. So check out our calendar too. Yeah, we've got pretty much the whole year planned out. So let's check it out on there. And then we have our Praxis in Action series going on. So you can sign up for our Praxis portal, and that will give you access to video series that we're doing, some based on facilitation. We have data and analytics, art for social change. So if any of those topics suit you, definitely visit the Practice in Action portal and get signed up, and you'll have access to all those videos. And I'll pass it back for closing.
Yeah, awesome. I'm dropping those links in the chat right now. I did want to highlight that we've got an Organizing 101 training, and that is coming up on August 24th. So I know a lot of folks are onboarding canvassers and organizers for the electoral season. If you have new folks joining and you want them to get Organizing 101, you can definitely come to that space. We're also going to have an EveryAction 102, which is going to elaborate on our last training. So we're going to create activist codes, survey questions, tags, and show you how to put them into an EveryAction internal data entry form to help you streamline your data entry. We can go over bulk uploads at another time. Yeah, just thank you all so much for being here. I'm going to drop the links for coaching and training requests one more time. And please continue to work on your surveys and hit us up for your data needs. Thank you so much for being here, y'all. May I see your request about a minivan training? Ariel is working with us on that, and we have a TBD on the calendar for the minivan training on September 7th. So put a hold on your calendar for September 7th, and we are going to be providing more information on that then. Yes, bring your teams. All right, thank you all so much for being here. We'll be sharing an email after today's training with the handouts, with the recording and the password, so you can share this with your teams. We really appreciate your energy being here today, and just let us know how else we can support the great work that you all are doing.
Junie,
Oh, puppy!
it was wild yesterday.
Yes, she was just attacking my foot, and I was like, okay, pick you on up.
Is Junie gonna be at the next coordinators meeting, next programs meeting?
I think so. I'm like wondering how many of us is like too much when she's just like people everywhere.